Yesterday I made a mistake. I couldn't get the guide rods to fit in the appropriate bushes in this unit. The reason turned out to be not that the guide rods were wrong, but that I was actually using the wrong pair of rods. You see, underneath this table here there is a spacer rod. It's just there as a structural piece to hold the thing in place, and these are 6mm bars. I'd actually used the 8mm guide rods for that job. They're the same length, exactly the same length, but that meant I'd got 6mm rods left over in place of these 8mm rods, and of course they didn't fit, which caused me to stop and email the supplier. And it wasn't until I was reviewing the video later that I suddenly spotted these things and realised the mistake I'd made, and I've had to send an apology to the guys to say it's not your fault, it's me being an idiot. So now I'm going to continue with the build, and I hope that they get that email before they actually send me a replacement part. One of the things about these bushes is they're not aligned in the holes when you get them, and you have to persuade them to fit by levering the guide rod in the hole until such time as it drops through the other side. This is not, I don't like doing that. I don't like forcing metal. I like to have things that fit straight away. I'm also not too sure about which side these bushes should be. I think in the video they have a completely different type. Oh, that one's nearly out of its hole. No, it's not seated at all well. Now those are not very nice. I would really like to change these for a decent bearing. Still very tight. Well off to one side. Because if you bend things too much, you finish up ovaling the holes, and that's never going to work. And this one's going in square enough, but it's refusing to drop through the hole on the other side. Well, we're in, but they are very tight. I'm just going to have to hope that they ease up a little bit with time and maybe a little lubrication. They drop in squarely, they just are basically just tight. Yeah, they're going square enough. Now at this stage in the assembly, the original, in the video, they actually put the motor in position. Okay, well that doesn't want to go in. Unlike the others which are actually loose, this one's tight. It's a good ½ millimetre, I would say. That's probably not a problem. I can release these screws a little and ease it into place. Yeah, undo these. Dear me, I've tightened that up well, haven't I? Spanner. That's eased it. Okay. Well, I'll put it together for now, and if necessary later on I'll take that out and give it a good workout. I'll see if I can't persuade it to release a little bit. But at this stage I'm more interested in seeing how things go together than actually getting it to work. Now, one thing I do notice is that the motor, which has the cutting spindle on it, is not going to use up a great deal of the table under here. There's a good inch of table to this right hand side, my right hand side, that's unreachable. So from about here to about here, the motor's not going to cut that. And with the table in position, there's an overhang on this side of about 1.5 inches. So ideally, this entire gantry, it looks as though it needs to go back this way, at least 1 inch. And possibly 1.5 inches, maybe 2 even. So it's well, very strange that. I'm not sure whether that's something I've got wrong or if it's designed like that. Let me illustrate. Here's the motor, which I'm guessing at this stage, but it fits there somewhere. Apparently this metal band has to come off, in which case you wonder why is it there in the first place. And how do you get it off? Do you just force it off? Never mind. Just put that there for the moment. So the cutting tool is going to be here rather than here. Anyway, we'll press on. The next thing to do is to put the motors in place. I've already assembled the electrics, so the motors are actually connected to the control board. But it's an easy matter to disconnect them. I'm sorry, I'm thumping the microphone. Okay, one motor. Two motor. Amazing, I managed to get this tangled up like this. I picked it up very carefully and put it down equally carefully, and it is thoroughly tangled. Okay, let's unplug that connection. There. Separated that and separated that. I can see that I need to be very careful with these, because these sleeved wires into the motor are a little vulnerable. I think too much bending backwards and forwards just there could actually damage that wiring, and then you'd be in real trouble. In fact, that's something that really, in the whole piece of kit with moving parts, really needs attention. That needs something to hold it in place to stop it moving around too much. Now, I noticed in the video that the Z shift, the motor is mounted with some spacers. We've got here these little hexagonal spacers about a centimetre long, and those were mounted onto the motor and then onto the platform. Now that suggests that somewhere in this collection of bits and pieces there are some studs in order, little bits of threaded rod to join these parts together, and I don't remember seeing anything like that in this collection. So bear with me a second while I ferret through, see if I can locate those. No, I see nothing. I see nothing that will do that. So we want some pieces of M3 threaded rod oh, say half an inch long, something like that. M3 are they? Yeah, they are M3. I mean, what you could do if you've not got anything else is just take the head off one of these screws and clean it up. Do that 4 times. But I think I've probably got some BA threaded I've got some M3 threaded rods in there. So I'm just going to pause the video while I go off and get some and cut those pieces myself. Okay, here we go. 4 pieces of threaded rod. I just cut the heads off some bolts in the end. Oh, get in there. Well, 1. 2. 3. 4. Now the spacers. Let's get those down into the hole. Still got a little bit of burring on the ends of the threads, which is causing me a little bit of trouble. And I notice I put the box of screws against the microphone again. I've had real trouble with the microphone on this system, which is probably evident from the video sound quality. But it's a very cheap little PC that I bought to keep in the workshop. I replaced an old Vista machine. Only cost me £100, bought it on eBay refurbished. I'm quite happy with it. But it's not really got much in the way of a sound card. It's not got much in the way of anything, to be honest. Okay. And we want some more M3 screws. Starting to run a little low on various bits and pieces. It's around about here usually you discover that you've forgotten something. I did notice on the instruction video that this motor was actually mounted before putting these pieces in place. Now I see why, because it's actually quite difficult to get the screw in here, and certainly to get an Allen key in to tighten the screw up. That's going to be a little bit of a struggle. That should have been obvious, but I didn't see it. This, of course, is where these ball-ended hex wrenches come in really handy, because with a normal hex wrench you have to go in absolutely square to get it in the hole, but with a ball-ended wrench you can go in at quite a wide angle and still turn the screw. You can't get much force behind it, but most of the time you only want to snug it up anyway, and you use the short end as a lever to give you a bite to snug it up. There is no way you would have got to that without a ball-ended hex wrench. So, if anyone else is using this video as an aid to assembly, don't do this. Okay, they're in. And that's a little bit of tightening. Not too much. The threads on these won't take a lot of levering. Right. Now, these obviously join the motors to the lead screws, and the lead screws okay, how can we get that in? Can we reach it from here? Obviously I should have put this screw in before I put the motor in. Yeah, fortunately I just have clearance to get it in. And it would have been a good idea to have fitted this to the motor before putting that in. But we're there, we've got it on. Okay, and last but not least is the final bearing that goes on the bottom. So I need to get a little bit further into the motor. Okay, well, what would have been an easier way of doing it? I'm not sure. This is quite fiddly. and persuading the lead screw to actually go through the middle of these. Oh, of course the bearing actually has a set screw in it, which won't allow the thing to slide because it protrudes into the bore. Okay, let's release that. Okay. Well, for the moment that's good enough. It's sticking out a little bit at the bottom. Obviously needs to go a little bit further in at the motor end, but I'm only assembling this thing to give myself a clear picture of how it's supposed to go together, and I'll be more serious about putting it together at a later date. I'm really only looking for any major problems at this stage. Making sure I've got everything. That screw's too short for that job. Do we have any longer M4s? I don't think so. What are these? Ah, yes, that's it. There's a set of M4s which are just slightly longer. I noticed this before, and they just happen to be the right size. What a surprise for this job. So these bearings actually have their own dedicated screw size. Worth remembering. But I forgot. There's not much in it. It's a couple of millimetres, 1/8 of an inch, something like that, but it's enough. Little things like that make the difference. That's better. Now where did I... Oh, of course, they're in this box. I carefully pulled them out separately some time ago because I realised that's what they were for. Okay, I am aware that I haven't tightened these. Okay, that's motor 1 and lead screw 1 in place. I'm still worried about the positioning of this table. So I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to go and take a good close look at exactly what it looks like on the assembly video. There's something very strange going on here. And we're back. Well, I've looked at the video, I've looked at the pictures, and as far as I can see, yes, this is correct. This is how it's supposed to be. And that cutting spindle really does, at its furthest limit of travel, it comes down very close to the middle of the table, and at the far limit of travel it overhangs the table by about 2 inches. Well, I'm pretty sure I can gain at least an inch by moving this gantry back, which, if I move the gantry back, means that this particular problem here with these lugs on the bottom can be solved by putting the bracket on the inside. I might need to beef up the outside with a plate, a fish plate or something, in order to hold that down, but apart from that I can easily gain myself an inch there. I'm a little surprised that they've gone to so much trouble to make something that's quite nice, but that positioning is just not well thought out. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. To be perfectly honest, I'm not happy with this framework anyway, and one of the first modifications I'm very likely to make is to replace this extruded aluminium frame with a custom made set of angled aluminium. It's an easy enough shape to make. All the hard work has been done in cutting these various plates for the assembly, which really is the sort of thing you don't want to be doing in a small workshop. Cutting pieces of angle iron and bolting them together is no problem at all. Making a complex shape like this and getting it accurate is quite tricky. Anyway, all that remains now is to assemble the other shifts and the motors and connect it all up. There isn't anything there to show. Everything that I have to do now is just a repeat of what I've done before. The lead screw has to go through, has to be screwed into place, the motor's bolted onto the plates. This motor has to go in here. I'm not quite sure how that goes. Perhaps I'll study that up and add a little bit on the video to show exactly how that goes in place. Very strongly magnetic, and I keep picking up screws with it. I've got to be careful I don't finish up with any screws inside. Oh yeah, I see how it goes. There are 2 screw holes in the bottom of the motor, 2 clearance holes in the plate at the bottom, and it just bolts to it. It's a case of removing this steel sleeve, which does actually come off. I think it's a magnetic keeper. I think it's only there for the purpose of preserving the magnets while the motor's not being used. Oh. Very strongly attracted to the other motor. Oh, there we are. There we are, drops nicely into the hole. A couple of mounting screws. And that basically is it. That's the build. All that remains is to get the software running, and we'll I think the next video will be of it running. I'm quite looking forward to that. Okay, I think I'll go and have a cup of tea, and then I'll come back and finish this, and I'll show you what it looks like when I've got it running.